did we just sort of complicate the message too much by not focusing on partner reduction? Did we try and over-complexify as we sometimes tend to do? Maybe it's worth sort of dialing it back and making it simpler and cleaner. I don't know, I mean, from a messaging standpoint.
I like that point an awful lot. I've always thought that reducing multiple partners is the best way of also tackling concurrency. You know, simple, direct messages. I do think a lot of the things that were done in South Africa, whether Love Life or the subsequent behavioral intervention, scrutinized, I found them pretty complicated. I think that would be a good example of things that, I'm not sure would want to go down. My view is that, partner reduction is easier to focus on than concurrency. But we also have to be fair, Southern Africa is not the optimal environment for partner reduction approaches. There's a lot of countervailing influences.
And just as a problem, I was also hoping this could be an exchange for David to learn a little bit more about what PSI has been up to of late, all the no good. But right now we're just in day 3 of a provider behavior change workshop, really sort of looking at other ways that we could work to influence behaviors in a more positive direction. And several folks in this room have been involved in the IPC Toolkit, which I don't know if you wanted to briefly mention the supervision and metrics. I apologize for putting you on the spot.
Well, I haven't been to their meeting, so I can't talk much about
the IPC Toolkit. The provider BCC was just FYI for your information.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that, and this has been led by another one of our colleagues, with a focus on reproductive health, but it's still cross-cutting, that we have developed this IPC Toolkit, IPC Deep Dive, and the purpose of it is to kind of go beyond kind of the strategic planning, which a lot of communication is focused on, and move into strengthening the quality and the way that we actually implement, particularly IPC. And so the tool has been disseminated within PSI, but the purpose of it again is to move beyond and try to kind of use better practices in terms of implementation. Some of the things that have been challenged about communication is that we're not implementing them well, but one could argue that that's because we spend a lot of time on strategy and not, quality assurance, ensuring that we have clear indicators for quality, reach, frequency. So all those types of things that kind of a very tangible kind of step-by-step process with better practices are part of the toolkit, which right now it's been disseminated within PSI, but it's, I think, a great resource to move beyond because there has been so much emphasis on strategy and not implementation.
So I think those are great points.
Well, I think for those of us who probably, like myself, are probably more on the clinical side of the spectrum, the lovely value add of having something like this IPC Toolkit now is that there's a lot of emphasis on supervision and referrals, strengthening referrals, so that then translates into a successful health outcome like accessing a service or using a product. Hence, increased perceived value among the biomedical folks, if you will, of IPC.
I think that makes complete sense. I guess that is the one sentence point I'd add about behavior change and behavioral prevention. I think to some extent we've allowed ourselves to be captured and made pessimistic by the worst cases, which effectively is South Africa and its 4 peripheral provinces of Lesotho, Swaziland and Botswana, which are they're South Africa. They're linguistically, culturally. So it's not as if you have a set of epidemics in Southern Africa in several countries that are qualitatively different. You have one country and its satellite, South Africa, whose epidemic is fundamentally different. And if we define behavioral prevention success by South Africa and its satellites, we're in trouble. But if you look more widely in Africa, the case for behavioral change and behavioral prevention is actually much more encouraging. So whenever we get bleak about the difficulties of partner reduction in South Africa, there are a lot more positive examples elsewhere.
Yeah, I think at our meeting, Martina Morris made a similar point to Daniel in saying that, if we're challenging behavioral interventions, and we're talking about this 25 countries that have had increased prevalence. He's like, people, that's been before the drugs.
Yes, it has.
So,
it has.
And it's been, linked to behavioral interventions, obviously. So,
I agree.
we're not talking about the positives as much.
Yeah, we're not selling our case well, I agree.
I'd just like to make a comment on that, but it kind of leads into a question is, donors work in kind of 2, 3, 5-year blocks, and they want to see a behavior change in 5 years.
Yeah.
Yet from a totally sociocultural, anthropological perspective, human behavior does not easily change
Yeah.
in 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, and this is often generational,
Yeah.
with not a lot of credence given to strong culture. You know, in
Yeah.
America, we don't. In many ways, our culture is strong in some areas, but weak in the others of what it means to be a woman or what it means to be a man. Whereas that's very, very different in Africa, where that could mean really to be seen as a man who is capable of taking care of women and needs partners.
Yeah.
As far as, how does the bank then, I mean, are they aware of this? How do they make other people aware of this, that you're not gonna see these big behavioral shifts in
Yeah.
5 years? It's gonna take so much more time, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think we suffer from exactly the same problem, and it was interesting that many of our first HIV projects were in fact in countries like Uganda, Zimbabwe, Kenya, where we concluded after 5 years that we had little to show for them. The 10 years on, you know, cumulatively, those are countries where the HIV story has actually been very good. It certainly wasn't because of us, but our programs might have contributed to more than was recognized at the time. I think there are two problems. I think the first problem you point out is the time frame within which behavior change occurs. To me, an equally important problem has been how long it takes us to notice behavior change when it's happened. You know, it took probably a decade for us to realize the extent of the behavior change in Uganda. Even Kenya and Zimbabwe probably took us 5 years to be aware. So not only can cultural change be slow to happen, but we can also be very slow to detect it. So that compounds the problem.
I just liken it to the messages of like wearing bike helmets.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been seeing that ad since I was 10 years old, but I actually didn't start using one until I was 25. You know, but it was finally through repeated messaging. Oh, my friends are doing it. Oh, I see it on TV. And that's always, I mean, I know it's going to save my life.
The
Yeah.
exploding watermelon image.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that absolutely.
Sorry.
You see that like a few times, and then, but it was this slow. But you know, I was actually talking to some students the other day, and you know, it was like, well, when did you actually, you know, that behavior change? What was that day? And I'm like, I don't know. It just happened over this period of time. But you would have never been able to capture it.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Because
True.
one day I wore a helmet, then 3 weeks went by and I didn't wear one, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it took so much time to get it every single day. And then I moved back to DC and it became life-saving. Never go anywhere without a
Even
helmet.
just this week.
Even when you're in taxi, yeah, even this week.
But some of the successes like bicycle helmets, tobacco, I mean, there's been a combined approach, legislation,
Yeah.
taxation,
I agree.
behavior change. And meanwhile, we know that,
Yeah, we do.
but for HIV,
Yeah.
so.
I agree with that. It does take us back to our earlier comment about structural interventions being harder to identify than in tobacco or
Yeah,
seatbelt
it's
or
not.
helmet use. And we had some really good discussions and exchanges in Southern Africa about this, and I think a colleague many of us know, Francois Fenton, made a very good point. And I think the point he makes is a sexual behavior change more akin to smoking, or is it more akin to obesity and weight management? And they're both very fundamental drives that are not easily regulated. His view, as a physician who worked on diabetes and hence on obesity for many years, is HIV is much more, sexual behavior change is more akin to obesity and weight management, and therefore much harder. And I think the difference is you can do a lot structurally to reduce smoking. It's harder if you,
I tell people to stop having sex, yeah.
and even food is hard to regulate in the way we've regulated smoking.